Good evening, everybody. I think we'll get started. My name is Salvatore Cumella. I'm the executive director here at the Matheson Museum. Welcome. Just a little housekeeping. I'm telling you about our next programs we have coming up. Uh, on Wednesday, October 2nd at 7 p.m., please join us for Why is the University of Florida in Gainesville with Carl Van Ness, UF Emeritus Librarian. This program tonight is being sponsored in part by Visit Gainesville, Alachua County, the City of Gainesville, and the Department of State, Division of Arts and Culture, the Florida Council on Arts and Culture, and the state of Florida. We'd like to thank them for their support. If you would like to make a donation or join as a member of the Matheson Museum, you can do that at our website at mathesonmuseum.org. Tonight, we are proud to have with us Lauren Gonzalez, who is a third-generation Floridian calling Gainesville home for over 20 years. She's the creator and writer of Florida Lives, a travel website about things to do all over Florida. She is passionate about exploring Florida and sharing her experiences, trips, and adventures. She joins us tonight for a book talk and presentation about her new book, 100 Things to Do in Gainesville Before You Die, where we'll learn about the process of researching and writing the book, Lauren's background in travel writing, and some special tips, tricks, and itineraries for exploring Gainesville. The book is an insider's guide and bucket list for some of the best things to do, see, and taste in Gainesville. Lauren takes you through her hometown, sharing both the tried and true experiences and the hidden gems, making this book a great resource for both newcomers and longtime locals. We're excited to have tonight Lauren Gonzalez. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And thank you, everyone, for braving the storm and the weather to join us tonight. It's very much appreciated. So in case you didn't realize, this book talk is about my brand new book, 100 Things to Do in Gainesville Before You Die. Before we really jump into the presentation, I wanted to see who we've got here today. So we're going to play a little game. All you have to do is raise your hand. Raise your hand if you live in Gainesville. Okay, pretty much everybody here. Raise your hand if you live in the greater Alachua County area, just outside of Gainesville. Okay, just a couple. And I don't think anybody didn't raise their hand, but is anybody just visiting? Oh, one. Okay, welcome to Gainesville. Okay, so raise your hand if you've moved to the area within the last year. All right, welcome, a few newcomers. Raise your hand if you've lived in the area for more than 5 years. And how about more than 10 years? And has anybody been born and raised in Gainesville? Okay, nobody. So 10 years, that's pretty good still. So now we're going to talk a little bit about me. My family moved to Gainesville when I was 9 years old in 2004. So I've pretty much grown up here. I've lived here almost my whole life. I've also lived in the Tampa Bay area, and I attended college at the University of South Florida. I've always wanted to be a writer ever since I literally could pick up a pencil and write a sentence. I thought I wanted to write books. So I'm really happy and proud that I am writing books, or I have written a book today. And I wrote I traveled all over Florida and written about it online at floridalives.com. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation. I love being outside, pretty much all outside activities, hiking, kayaking, biking, snorkeling, camping, you name it. One of my goals is to visit all the Florida state parks. Right now I'm at 72 out of the 175, so still a long way to go, but making some progress there. I'd like to visit all the national parks, which I'm at 8 out of 63 right now, and I'll be visiting 2 more next month. And then kind of a unique one is I want to visit a state park in every state. So a lot of people have the goal to visit every state, but maybe that means different things for different people. So for me, I would really like to experience the nature that every state has to offer. So I think it would be really cool to visit a state park in every state. And then some of my other hobbies, pretty much anything crafty, journaling, digital art, reading, all of those things. And then some fun facts. My favorite color is green. I love sushi, Cheez-Its. My favorite animal is a manatee, except sometimes it's an otter if I'm kayaking and I see them kayaking because there's just such a treat to see them. I am a Cancer. And I would love to visit Alaska and Italy, and my favorite season is fall. So we're coming up on that, and we'll talk a little bit about fall activities in this presentation as well. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about growing up in Gainesville and some early pictures from that. So the first one you see is a newspaper article that my sister and I were featured in the Gainesville Sun just a few months after my family had moved here, actually, which was a really interesting experience because we had never been in the paper before, coming from like the Tampa Bay area where things are a little bit more larger scale, and to be in the paper, you had to be like it had to be a really important event. We just went to Morningside Nature Center and wound up in the paper. So that was really fun for my family. So I was 9 in that picture. I'm the one on the left, and my sister is on the right, and she was 5. And so, yeah, we just stopped into Morningside Nature Center one day because we drove by it all the time and we loved exploring parks and nature. So that's kind of how we started exploring Gainesville. Just when we would drive past something or see something that looked interesting, we would just stop in. And my sister and I also joined Girl Scouts when we first moved here. So that was another way that we got to explore a lot of different parks and activities around Gainesville. And in the picture on the right, you can see my family there. We were picking strawberries, and that was a Girl Scout activity that we had done. So that was really fun. And now I love doing like you pick fruits. Definitely recommend it if you haven't tried that yet. And some more pictures here. On the left, I was at Dudley Farm Historic State Park. That was another Girl Scout activity we did. That's me and my friend there. But we would go to Dudley Farm pretty much every year for the annual cane grinding festival. And that's so much fun because you get to see the volunteers that like dress up in the period clothing from the 1800s and early 1900s and see how they like actually work on the farm and do the farm chores and things that would have been done during that time. So that's a really cool event. And in the middle is the observation tower at La Chua Trail, which has actually been closed now for like at least 5 years, I think, at this point, due to high water. So you can actually see in the picture there that there's like caution tape below the tower. I think the water was even pretty high back then, but you could still get to the tower and climb up the stairs. And it was a really cool place to visit, but unfortunately, it's been closed due to flooding for some time now. So hopefully that reopens again at some point. And then the far picture is the Gator Nationals, which is also another really cool activity if you like drag racing or cars of any kind. You get to see the drag races right here in town, and it's a really, really amazing activity. Okay, so now we're going to talk about how I got started writing this book. Like, how did this happen? And that all starts with Florida Lives, which is the website that I mentioned that I travel right on. But basically, my family has been camping, canoeing, and doing all kinds of outside activities, visiting state parks since before I was born. You can see the top picture is me and my cousins when we went camping. I was not even 4 years old, and I don't know how our parents managed to go like primitive camping with children under 5. I don't know, but they did all the time. And that was just really fun. A big part of my childhood was just going to state parks, and we loved canoeing too. So we've always been kind of like an outdoor nature family. And in 2018, my parents had the idea to start a family project where we would visit all the Florida state parks, which again, there's 175, so this is a long project. And we would document these journeys on this website called Florida Lives, which they had had the domain of since like the early 2000s. So I thought that was a great idea. We all love state parks. I had just gotten my degree in journalism, and I had a blog online that was starting to get like a few thousand views a month. So I was like, yes, this sounds like a perfect combination of everything that I love, all of my skills. So let's actually roll with this and do more than just state parks and make it all about Florida and all kinds of activities in Florida. And so the rest is kind of history there. It just really took off. I do have social media now, Instagram and Facebook mainly. spanning all Florida activities and with a focus still on state parks, but it's really all activities all over Florida. And in February 2023, I wrote a travel guide to Gainesville where I talked about some of my favorite restaurants, some of the parks and nature we had here, just kind of in an easy, digestible post on Instagram and on my website. And then a few weeks later, I got an email from the publisher of this book, Reedy Press, that they were looking for an author for the 100 Things to Do in Gainesville book. And the rest is history. So, not many times you hear a publishing company reaches out to someone to be an author, but that's what happened to me, and it was incredible, and I'm so thankful. So a little bit more about the book. Basically, it is an insider's guide. It includes several different sections of things to do, which we'll look at in a second. And I've got a pretty good mix in here of some of the popular, well-known experiences, as well as things that I would consider to be more hidden gems that maybe not everybody knows about. There's also some itineraries in here for different interests and different seasons, and we'll look at those more closely in a second. But really, this is like a perfect bucket list or guidebook, whether you're new in town or whether you have been here a long time and you're just looking for some new things to do. So I wrote this book specifically with the goal for it to be useful for everybody, no matter how long you've been in town. So I've heard actually from several longtime locals already in this journey that they might have done a lot of the things in the book already, but they're using it still as a resource for maybe when visitors come to town or just for some new ideas for things to do on weekends. So it's really useful for everybody. So as I mentioned, this book is part of a national series. It's published by a publisher called Reedy Press, and there is 100 things to do in many different cities all over the country, also some like general areas or states. So this is just the Gainesville version, but there is also an edition for other cities in the area like Jacksonville, St. Augustine, Tampa, Orlando, all those cities. So Gainesville took a little bit longer to get its version. It's a little bit smaller of a town than those other places, but it's about time it got its own guidebook. Excuse me. All right, so what's in the book exactly? Everything is broken down into easy to read pages. So every one of the 100 things has its own page. And it has information and tips about that thing all in one place. So this is an example of the Harn Museum. There's not that many pictures in the book. Not everything has a picture, but that's a picture of the Harn Museum. And then there are things, of course, in Gainesville, but then there's also some things in the surrounding area, like, for example, High Springs, Micanopy, things in the general Alachua County area. And then there's also a few day trips, things that I thought would be worthwhile to visit, even if you live in Gainesville. And we'll talk about those too in a minute. So the book is broken into 5 sections. They are food and drink, culture and history, music and entertainment, sports and recreation, and shopping and fashion. So sports and recreation is the section that encompasses all of the parks and trails, and I think that's probably my favorite section. But food and drink was definitely the hardest one to narrow down because each section only has about 20 to 25 things in it, and it was really hard to pick just 20-something restaurants. And then there are also itineraries in the back of the book. So we've got itineraries listed by season. So things that would be really good to do in specific seasons, and maybe things that are only happening during those times of years, specific festivals and things like that. And like I said, we'll talk about fall events later on in the presentation. And then there are also itineraries by interest. So things that you can do like weekend getaways, activities on the water, history buffs, great for kids, and there's also a bunch more. So just groupings of different listings that are in the book that fall into those categories. So if you're looking for some specific activity that might help you get everything in one place. And then some day trips. So everything that's considered a day trip is within 1 to 1.5 hours from anywhere in Gainesville. So like Cedar Key might be 45 minutes away from folks in Southwest Gainesville, but like over an hour from people in Northeast Gainesville. But everything should be within 1.5 hours from anywhere. And like I said, these are all places that I feel like would really be worth your time to go visit, even if they're not technically in Gainesville. But like Cedar Key, I think a lot of Gainesville locals would say is kind of an extension of Gainesville. Like it's a place that you definitely have to visit if you're a Gainesville resident. And then I include some itineraries for these places. So you're not just driving over there to do one thing. I've listed like 3 to 5 different activities you can do all in that one place. And also some options for staying overnight if you'd like to do that as well. Okay, so are there just 100 things in the book? The answer is no. There's actually a lot more than 100. I have snuck in a lot of extras. As you can see in this example, which is find fresh produce at the Hale Village Farmers Market. That's on one page, and then the page facing it has 6 other farmers markets around town that you can visit as well. So there's quite a few pages like this that have multiple different activities all rolled into one. So you're really getting a lot more than 100 activities, and you can kind of pick and choose which ones are closest to you or which ones interest you more from that one listing. Okay, so a little bit about writing the book. It took a lot of research to write the book. I did a lot of online research, talked to my friends and family about what their favorites were and got their recommendations for what they felt should be in the book. I visited, of course, a lot of places in town, read reviews online, all of that. A ton of research. And then I had to narrow it down from there. So, like I said, it was very hard to narrow down, especially the restaurants. Unfortunately, I couldn't put every single thing in Gainesville into the book, even if I wish I could. But choosing only 100 was really a challenge. And then the writing process, between research and writing, it took me about 10 months start to finish. I started writing with the activities that I knew really well, that I had been going to for years and years and years. And then I gradually worked my way towards the newer to me activities. And I started doing what I call Gainesville days, which were just days that I would spend the entire day just like traveling around the city, seeing what I could find, trying out different places that I hadn't been to before. And here is an example of a Gainesville day. I think that these type of itineraries are so fun because especially if you have out-of-town guests visiting or you're just looking for a way to spend your Saturday, you can just do a bunch of different activities all at once. And I specifically picked this one because you can just park your car once and not move it the entire time. So I would start at afternoon and I would get brunch. It's like my favorite meal of the day. That's the bottom left picture there. And then I would head over to Serpentine, which is that long picture on the right. It's like a plant shop, wine bar, gift shop kind of place, really cool. Flashbacks, which is a vintage clothing store, and Sunshine Records. They're all right there in that same kind of plaza area. And then I would head over to either Bragging Rights, which is an arcade, or the Hatchetbury, which is an axe throwing bar. And those are all just right across the street. And so you could definitely spend a few hours at either one of those, throwing axes or playing arcade games, whatever interests you. And then I would head over to Germain's, which is one of my absolute favorite restaurants. I love their chicken sandwiches. They are so good. And then end your day at Cypress and Grove Brewing, which definitely a Gainesville brewery is a must way to end your day. All right, so some different ways you can use the book. You can use this book to get some ideas for your out-of-town guests who are visiting. If they're coming to town and you're like suddenly panicking, like I don't know where to take them, you can use this book as kind of a guidebook or leave it in their guest room and they can kind of flip through it and see what interests them. You can also use it as a boredom buster. So if you have no idea what to do, you're not sure where to go to dinner, you can just play the boredom buster game, which is you flip it open and you go do a random thing that's on that page. So we could go experience the dueling pianos at the Keys. You can also keep it in your glove box. Like if you're in the car and you're just like, hey, we have a couple of spare hours, what should we go do? And then, of course, gifting for holidays, birthdays. The person who has everything might like the copy of this book as well. And like I mentioned, in case you have guests coming to town and you're just not sure where to take them, here are some of my suggestions. I always am going to put Lachua Trail as number one for out-of-town guests because people that don't live in Florida or maybe they're from a different part of Florida and have never seen an alligator, their jaws will literally be on the ground if you take them to Lachua Trail. The alligators are so close to the trail if you catch them at the right time. And it's a pretty accessible, easy walk for most people. So it's really, really good to take all of your guests there. My pro tip is visit, if you can, during the winter when it's a little bit cold during the day. That's when you're going to have the best chance of seeing them on the banks. Or if it's like summertime and it's not cold outside, definitely try to go around sunset time because that's also going to give you the best chance of seeing them out of the water. During the middle of the day when it's hot, they're in the water and you really won't see them as much. Of course, satchels is also going to be very high on the list. People love satchels. It's so unique. It's so eclectic. It's so Gainesville. So definitely bring your guests there. I threw in Auk Market in case they're looking for any local gifts or souvenirs to remember their time by. Devil's Millhopper is another really unique natural spot that you can go down inside of a sinkhole. That one's a little bit less accessible, lots of stairs to get down to the bottom, but definitely really cool. And I've explored all over Florida, and there's really not many sinkholes you can climb down into. This is pretty unique. And then, of course, the bat houses are another one that will amaze people. And then I threw in some other extras down there at the bottom that I thought would also make great stops for your guests. Okay, now it's fall, so we'll talk a little bit about some fall activities. I put these up in order of when they're happening. So, number one, the Amber Book Farms Fall Festival actually already started last weekend. If you haven't been to Brook Farms, it's mainly a blueberry farm, like a you-pick blueberry farm, but they have a lot of other stuff. In the fall, they do sunflowers and their fall festival. They have vendors and hay rides and a pumpkin patch and all kinds of fun fall activities. And then, of course, there are several art festivals going on. This weekend is supposed to be Thornbrook. I'm actually not sure if it's still going on with the hurricane. It probably should be passed by then, but that might be going on this weekend. And then, of course, the McIntosh 1890s Festival is another big arts and crafts festival. It's actually really huge. If you love art festivals, definitely check that one out, as well as the Micanopy Fall Festival. It's also huge. The Kirby Farms Scary Train is really interesting. It's a very historic train that you can actually ride around on around the farm. But then they also have these kind of haunted house type of things. Like if you've been to Halloween Horror Nights, it's like the rural version of that. It's like a little homemade, but it's really fun. I really recommend that if you like that kind of Halloween Horror Nights type of thing. Of course, Tom Petty weekend at the Heartwood Soundstage, where it's just like a big tribute to Tom Petty and music. It's a great weekend. The Florida Bat Festival at Luby Bat Conservancy is coming up in October as well. Again, if you love bats, that's like the best place to go, definitely. Bat houses, of course, are kind of a spooky season activity that's really good for the evenings in October. And you can see the bats any evening, any time of year. And then, of course, the Newberry Cornfield Maze, which I think might be one of the most popular things to do. That is also a really fun one. Okay, so now we're going to play a little game. It's called Where Am I? So all you have to do is look at the picture and guess where it was taken. And you can just shout out the answers if you know. Does anybody know? Yes, absolutely. Gainesville Hawthorne Trail. So this trail is perfect for pretty much any activity that you would like to do on a trail. You can walk, run, bike, skate, and even horseback ride because there is like a grassy or non-paved area next to the trail for horseback riding, as well as several access points where you can bring your horse trailer. What I like to do is park at the Bulwer Springs entrance, and then you can see the historic Bulwer Springs building. And then you can bike over to the Lachua Trail and also to the Alachua Lake Overlook and back. In total, that's about 5 miles of biking, so that's a really enjoyable ride. And a lot of it's pretty shady like this, so good for any time of year. All right, next. Kanapa Botanical Gardens. Yes, we're starting off easy, guys. It's going to get a little harder. So in this picture, you can see the giant Victoria water lilies. They are there in season throughout the summertime, and they die off during the winter. So you still have a few months, a few weeks left of those before they'll go away for the year. But the gardens are really great anytime, even when the water lilies aren't in season. So it's also home to the largest public collection of bamboo in Florida, which they do have a lot of bamboo. And then also a variety of other gardens, fountains, ponds, just a lot of cool stuff to see there. Where am I? Century Tower, yes. So this is on the UF campus. If you walk around outside of it, they usually have like a program chime every 15 minutes throughout the day. And then you can sometimes catch longer live performances by caroliners. I hope I pronounced that right. But they actually do, like UF students are actually ringing the bells in the tower during these live performances. So it's pretty cool to catch those too. Okay, I did not know that. That's very interesting. Oh, good to know. In case anyone didn't hear that, they have a Halloween show with spooky music. Satchels, yes. That actually says satchels in some of the stickers, so I'm glad that you guys got that. Um, so this is, of course, the iconic VW van outside of Satchels. Um, this is definitely one of the most iconic places you can eat in Gainesville, I think. If you're lucky, you can snag a seat in the van, although sometimes it has a long wait or it would be impossible to get seated in there. So if you go during a weekday, usually I find that you might be able to get a spot in the van or at least not have to wait super long. But if you do find yourself having to wait, you can always stop in Leighton and Salvage in the back and shop for some really interesting eclectic gifts. They do have live music there sometimes and a bar as well. Anybody know this one? This one's kind of a yes. It's inside the Museum of Natural History. Yes. I was hoping to trick some people with this because it, I think, looks like a real cave. But this is inside the Museum of Natural History. And this is actually a cave exhibit. So it's much bigger than this picture shows, but it looks like a real cave and they have a bunch of interactive elements. And there's also a bunch of other cool displays in the museum that are interactive as well. They just opened a new area about springs and they have like a Silver Springs boat ride section, which is really cool. But if you want to visit the museum, go before January because they are going to be closing for at least a year for renovations. So go within the next 2 months if you want to see it and you haven't seen it yet. Ceylon oak, yes. So this is one of the largest live oak trees in Florida. The picture does not do it justice, of course, but this tree is absolutely gigantic. It was once the champion tree, meaning it was the largest, either in height, width, or crown spread. It's since been dethroned by another tree that was found on private property, so you really can't go see that one. So this is the largest still publicly observable live oak tree, and it's really huge. It's definitely worth checking out. It's actually inside the city of Gainesville, technically. It's kind of up towards Alachua, so it's a little bit of a drive, but it's absolutely worth it. It's really, really cool. The park itself doesn't have too many amenities, but the tree is definitely worth the visit. Nope. Any guesses? Okay, this is Superette. So this is a restaurant. And they serve Mediterranean food, charcuterie, wine, cocktails. They do have a really nice outdoor space as the weather starts to cool down. It's like a beautiful patio garden area where you can enjoy wine and charcuterie. I actually had a book signing there a few weeks ago, but it's really nice food, really good atmosphere, perfect for like a date night or if you want to just hang out with some friends. It's a really, really nice atmosphere. This is one that I would consider to be a little bit more of a hidden gem that's in the book. Oh, I'm really bad at streets. Yes. It did, yeah. And it's really tucked away kind of in a neighborhood, so it's not something you would drive by all the time. All right, where am I here? Yes. Yes, Morningside Nature Center, yes. They have that really cute little cow. So this is like a living history farm. Basically, it's a collection of historic buildings. They also have some trails, a nature center, and also Timucuan Village, so replicas of like thatched buildings and things. But they also do have animals there that they care for. And each Wednesday they do a Barn Buddies program where kids can go and like feed the animals. If you'll remember from the very beginning of the presentation, when I was in the newspaper, this is where we were at Morningside Nature Center, looking at the animals, and that's where we got photographed. Where am I here? Yes, Santa Fe Teaching Zoo. That's probably the only place you can see an emu in Gainesville, I think. So this is a really nice place. It's all very shady. It's very natural. It's amongst like the trees and the normal habitats. So it's a really nice place to visit, and you can see different animals like monkeys, a bunch of different types of birds, alligators. It's definitely a really good place for kids. Also a good place to take visitors. Pretty accessible as well. Definitely stroller and wheelchair friendly. Where am I? Chopsticks, yes. I've heard it called the only waterfront dining in Gainesville. I can't verify that completely, but it might be. We don't have a lot of bodies of water in Gainesville, in Gainesville proper. So yeah, they have a really amazing patio with this beautiful waterfront view, and the sunset's really, really pretty over the water. So definitely try to time your dinner just right and get on the patio. It's beautiful. And their Pan-Asian cuisine is really delicious. They have, um, oh, bug spray was a tip. I am usually the person to get bit. Like nobody else will have any bug bites, and I'll be like covered in them. So that's definitely a good tip for me. Um, but they have pretty much all like types of Asian cuisine, like sushi, pad thai, all of the really good stuff. They do a lot of like specialty requests and things there too. So if you're looking for something specific or specific flavors or have any allergies or dietary restrictions, they're really accommodating of that kind of stuff as well. I'm glad that some people are like really good with street names because I could never answer a question like that on the spot. I need a map at all times. Okay, anybody know where this is? Yes, Lob Lolly. So this is actually a really hard one. So I'm impressed that you knew exactly which park it was. Because this is the Hogtown Creek, which runs through a large part of Gainesville, and there are many parks that you can actually see this creek at. Probably at least 8 or 10. There's quite a few parks. And the creek is absolutely beautiful. Hopefully you can tell in the picture, but it's like crystal clear. It's so lush around it. And this is one of my favorite parks in Gainesville. And it's literally like tucked away. You might never even know it's there. It's right behind West Side Park, off of 8th Avenue. See, I knew that street. Um, but it has like a little dirt parking lot and it's just like a little trail. Like you would almost never know it's there. It actually does have two entrances, but the one behind Westside Park is my favorite one. So definitely recommend this park. And that's all for the game. So good job, everyone that knew. We got pretty much all of them. So where to get the book if you would like it? There are a few places in town that sell it. They're all listed there. There are copies here at the History Museum that will be signed after tonight's event. And then you can also get it online at readypress.com, which there's a QR code there if you are interested. And I do have copies today available for sale that I will sign to you after the event. And if you would like, it should be. Do you have any contacts there I can speak to? I've been trying to get it in a lot more places around town, but it's surprisingly more difficult than it would seem. You would think that would get them, but not always. There will be time for questions in just 1 second. Okay, so if you would like to follow me on any of my social media pages, these are my Instagram QR codes here. I have the 100 Things Instagram, which is just focused on all Gainesville activities, book events, and updates, and things like that. And then on the right-hand side is my Florida Lives, which is about things all over Florida. And I'll come back to this slide in a minute, but yes, any questions from anyone? Yes, go ahead. Oh, good to know. I did not know they had it. Thank you very much.
Did you look at Theater of Memory? Since that was on my mind.
What do you mean by look at it?
Did you go there and did you talk to Bill and
I've seen it, yeah. It's really cool. Ha have you been there?
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's very
It is. It's very unique. Such a special thing, Gainesville, with things from all over the world, not just Gainesville. It is. That is a really hard question. The question was, what's my favorite? I really can't pick just one. It was extremely hard even narrowing it down to 100 favorites. I am very partial, like I said, to the parks and the nature in town. I think we have really special parks here. So I would have to pick that as like a general category being my favorite. I love Devil's Millhopper and Payne's Prairie especially. Okay. Okay, let's open to a random page. We've got Santa Fe College Teaching Zoo, which we talked about, and Follow Hogtown Creek through Gainesville, which we also talked about. So both of those are really good ones. Um, I don't know, restaurants, I really couldn't pick just one. I really couldn't. Depends on what I'm in the mood for, you know? Um, I definitely love Germain's. Germain's is number one in the book. Although everything in the book is in a random order, it's not necessarily in favorite order, but I did really like that one, so I did put it first. And then I did put Satchel's second because that one's pretty iconic. So those are two really good restaurants. Um, in my music entertainment section, I guess I would pick the Hippodrome because I think that that is definitely a really iconic Gainesville one as well. Definitely worth seeing. Even just the building is really beautiful, and then they have different programs all year round, so there's always something new for you to see. And then the sports and recreation section, I guess I would pick Payne's Prairie because I just love it there so much. Culture and history. I will pick Dudley Farm for culture and history because Dudley Farm is a really unique place. In that all the buildings there are original to exactly where they are. So a lot of these historic farmsteads, especially around Florida, you see a lot of them, but the buildings are all from different places and they're moved into that one area to replicate what that town might have looked like or what that farm might have looked like. But the Dudley Farm is all the exact original buildings and the exact original places that they stood. So that's a really unique like format, I guess. It's not very common to see that. Actually, I don't know that I've been to any others that are exactly like that. So it's really, really cool. And like I said before, the volunteers there dress up in the period clothing and they do all of the farm activities. And it's really cool to see like a kind of real working 1800s farm there. And then the final section, shopping and fashion. Oh man, it's hard to pick just one of these too. Because I think the farmers markets are definitely amazing. And it's really cool that we have a farmers market almost every day of the week here. Like pretty much every day of the week, somewhere you'll find a farmers market. But I do really like the Auk Market because they have a lot of local handmade products and things that show off some of the local artists in town. So I think that's really cool. Sure. Yes. I definitely want to write more books. Like I said, I've always wanted to be a writer, so I didn't really plan to start that at this point in my life, but it just happened. So I definitely want to write more. I would love to write some fiction, some historical fiction books as well. And then I would also like to write some more nonfiction, more guidebooks for other places around Florida, since I have done a lot of like exploring around Florida. I would love to do a book of like day trips and weekend trip itineraries. So those are some things. Yes. Okay. I wrote the book. It came out in July of this past year, and then I started writing it in like August of 2023. So, well, not August. It took me about 10 months, and I finished it in March of 2023. So, yeah, good question. Well, I was a child when I first moved here, so I can't really say about things that were around back then as much, but definitely a book like this can like become outdated as things come and go pretty quickly. There's one thing that I definitely will say I really wish made it in the book but didn't, and that was High Dive. That closed like 2 months ago, maybe. It was literally after I had submitted my final version of this book to my publisher, it closed. So we had to like go in at the 11th hour and take it out. So that's something that I'm really sad that closed. Like it definitely a piece of mail that I wish stayed open and would have been in the book, but fortunately we had to take it out. Thanks. Yes.
Got a couple online questions.
Okay.
First one is will the book sell at links, and how often do you think it will need to be updated?
I am not sure. The book was at the links at one point. I am not sure if it's still available there or if it has sold out at this point. And as far as how often the book needs to be updated, there are second and even third editions of some of these 100 Things books, and typically that timeline would be about every 18 months to 2 years. Definitely between that time frame, a lot of things will come and go, so definitely would be time to update within 2 years, I would say.
And then the other question, where to next?
Well, this is out of Florida, so it's kind of off brand, but in a few weeks, I am actually going to Virginia and West Virginia to go to Shenandoah National Park and New River Gorge National Park, which, as I mentioned earlier, it's my goal to visit all the national parks, so that will make 10 national parks visited. Is there a question?
Besides Cedar Key, which you mentioned as a day trip, what would be another one or two day trips you've mentioned in the book?
Yeah, so on that slide, I also had, oops. Well, that's okay. I won't go back. But there was a picture of Rainbow Springs State Park, which is in Dunellen, so about 45 to an hour away from Gainesville. And that's like a historic roadside attraction type of park where there's a little bit of remnants of old Florida. In that picture, it showed like a really crazy 100-foot, not 100-foot, but it looked like it, really tall waterfall, which like is not Florida, but it's all man-made, but it's really, really cool. And there's also a beautiful spring there to see, Rainbow Springs, and a beautiful river to kayak as well. So that's one that I would absolutely recommend. And although it's not really in Gainesville, I think that it's absolutely a beautiful place and on par with like Itchnatuckney level beauty. That's a little bit more Gainesville, I guess, than Rainbow Springs, but definitely worth it. And then some other options I have Micanopy. So that's not really super far for a lot of people, but I would consider it a day trip because there's so many things to see there. One of my favorites is the historic cemetery. If you've ever driven by that or walked by it, it's really, really amazing. There's some very old grave sites in there, and they're all kind of a little bit dilapidated, but in like a creepy way, but in a good way. So if you like historic cemeteries, that's a beautiful one to check out. And then, of course, there's some museums and some antique shops to do in Micanopy as well. And the Hairlong Mansion Bed and Breakfast is a really good option to stay at there. Sure. Great. Well, if there's no further questions, we can wrap it up. And thank you all so much for being a great audience. And we'll have book signing in the back corner there. So if anyone wants to stop by.